We have reached that point in the season where hope is everything.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Nick is back as well. He is here full time now that I have stolen him from football season. Nick, how are you doing?
It was a restful weekend, didn't do too much. The Flames win on Saturday was nice, so we have good vibes going into the week.
Absolutely. Nothing better than that on a fine Monday. Today, we are going to be talking about this final, less than 2 months of Flames hockey, regular season hockey that is remaining, and just kind of where things are at and what we want. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. So let's dive right in. What are the Flames?
Stubborn. That's the single best word I can give them. Is the Flames don't know that they're supposed to be losing. The Flames are too stupid to realize that it would behoove them to look ahead from the. It would behoove them as an organization to be a little bit more forward thinking. But the rest of the way, the Flames' goal is to be the pebble in the shoe of every team they play. They're not going to out talent a lot of teams, but they can be really annoying. And when you're a team with not a lot to play for, spite is very powerful.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that this season, and just that nobody believes in us mentality and what that does to a team. And I feel like that was very evident in Saturday's game against Edmonton. I think most people kind of went into that with the idea of the Flames getting steamrolled, and they actually showed up for a game.
Yeah, that was very fun. It is very infrequent where you're going to get to have that type of game in a regular season environment, and it's just going to be fun as opposed to stressful. And that's the way I'm going to look at this, and we're going to talk about this more later. The rest of the season is whether they win or lose, it doesn't really matter. So the focus for us as fans watching should be to have as much fun as possible over the next month and a half, which is just them being as chaotic a team as they possibly can, basically, is the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good way to look at it. And like you said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I saw James Johnson from the Win column put together a combination of the last 32 games for the Flames. They are streaky. Next to stubborn, that's the next best word.
And that's in part because of how they win their games typically. When we talk about teams that ride the percentages, that are teams that are really reliant on bounces going their way, those are typically teams that rely on either their shooting talent, their goaltending, or both. We know the Flames are a goalie team, and when Markstrom's dialed in and he's on a nice heater, they can rattle off 3, 4, 5 in a row. But when the goaltending isn't there, they're not going to be able to do that. Over the last 10, they're 7-3-0. Markstrom's got the third most goals saved above expected in that window. They've outscored opponents 33-27. They're doing okay offensively. The power play has been better than it's been the rest of the season over the last 10 games. They're riding the percentages. When they rattle off these wins and they get a bunch in a row, more often than not, it's been because Markstrom's playing out of his mind.
Yeah, and I thought that with Vladar in net, for the first time in over a month, things were not going to go as well as they did. I didn't expect a Jacob Markstrom performance out of him. And I mean, assuming Jacob Markstrom gets moved, I'm fine with Vladar and Wolf. Like, we've already discussed this, but at least it won't be San Jose Sharks level of bad goaltending.
No, and the Flames have made the calculated decision. They know where they are. Based on what we've talked about and based on all of the prevailing sentiment around the team, around the league, they are going to trade Markstrom more likely than not. Everything out there would indicate that's going to happen. He's clearly the best goalie that's available. And yeah, that'll change the Flames calculus as a team night to night. But the last 10 games, 7-3-0, like I said, the style to be annoying is there. They have controlled play. They haven't generated a lot of dangerous looks, but they've had the puck more than other teams. They've cycled the puck. They've forechecked pretty well. The Flames' biggest issue is they don't have the finishing talent. If they had one or two guys who could actually shoot the puck, we're having a very different conversation about the direction of the team, frankly. But because of where they are and who they are, we can say that some of the last 10 games and the success in that window is just bounces balancing out. And I know that's unsatisfying. And to some people, they'll say, well, you're taking credit away from the team. They're going out and making those bounces happen. But in a long season, and as you said, when they've had these 4 or 5 game winning streaks and 5 and 6 game losing streaks, it's been about those bounces. And typically speaking, the teams that are overly reliant on the bounces going that way aren't that good.
No. And I think another thing to consider in this 10-game stretch is the start of that was right after the All-Star break. So, I mean, you either get a really well-rested team, or you're getting a team like they saw with the Bruins. That was their first game back, and they just steamrolled them. Boston didn't show up. And that's, one of those luck situations that they find themselves in.
For sure. And that's the thing when you're a team like the Flames, and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday about the Rangers losing to Columbus, is when you're not a particularly talented team, you're going to show up willing to work a lot harder than the teams with a lot of talent. Like Columbus has wins over the Bruins, the Leafs, the Rangers, Vegas. Like Columbus is by no measure a good team. But when these good teams show up and they don't take them seriously, they're going to try hard. They're going to try and win these games. And that's the recipe for the Flames the rest of the way. They're not going to be able to win on talent. They are going to have to be annoying to play against. They are going to have to outwork who they're playing, but they just did it to the Oilers. The Oilers are a decent to good team. If you can do that to the Oilers, you can do that to any team. Now, it's not easy to live that way, having to win on effort and attention to detail all of the time. But if you can continue to give teams, especially in your division, a hard time the rest of the way, that matters. And we talked about that a lot last week as far as setting the tone of what the Flames are going to look like going forward. If they continue to do stuff like that, like I'm not saying they got to beat these divisional opponents often, but stick it to LA, stick it to the Oilers, stick it to Vegas, stick it to any team that thinks they're better than you and that comes in your building or you go to their building. If they think they're better than you, make them prove it. If they're not going to work for it, outwork them and win the damn game. That's ultimately what the rest of the season is about for the Flames.
And, we talk about playing annoying, and I feel like Martin Pospisil has just kind of become that little fly in your ear, and it's great. And we've seen Zary get mixed in with it as well, so like they're trying in that aspect, because I feel like the Flames haven't had something like that really since Matthew Tkachuk.
For sure. And some of that is just gamesmanship, and I'll be quick on my point because we're up against the clock here, but some of that is just gamesmanship. That's stuff to fire yourself up. It's not even to antagonize the other team. And we're going to talk about it, the irrational confidence of, you got to believe you can hang with these teams that are better than you. You've got to mentally say, all right, you might be better than us, but you're not going to outwork me. I'm going to be annoying. I'm going to do everything I can to annoy you every single time I'm on the ice. And again, that matters in establishing what the Flames are going to look like going forward.
And coming up next, we will talk about that and just continuing to believe in this Calgary Flames team. But first, we are going to take a quick break here and talk to you about our sponsor, Camino Consulting. You've heard our online family and couples course and taken advantage of the Locked On 25% discount running to the end of the month. But what about the live seminars? In both sports and business, the challenge is differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurable and qualifications, but we all know it is the intangibles that matter. Like we say in hockey, you want to be that veteran presence in an office, right? Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen, both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them with their own preferences. But you aren't in business management or working with a team? We pay referrals. Make some money by making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together better at the end of our year one better at the end of year one than week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast because you're not going to want to miss an episode leading up to the deadline. And, of course, after, because all the dominoes will have fallen at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the real conundrum for the guys that are still here. You know, for the guys that are still here, it's, damn, they think we're not good enough to do anything. They're trading away guys who are actively helping us. What am I prepared to do about it? That's ultimately what it comes down to for the guys who are still here, especially the older guys who are making a decent amount of money. And yeah, the money helps, but going to work every day with a vested interest in people hoping you lose, that's a terrible environment to be in.
Yeah, that's definitely not one with great morale. I think about like how important the culture of every locker room is, and we've talked about it a lot on this show and just in general as hockey fans. I think that we all appreciate, a good vibe. You don't want anyone on the outs. Like a few years ago, there was the rumor that the room was split between Mark Giordano and Matthew Tkachuk, and we don't have that, which is great. But now we need something to keep them going and to avoid any of those rifts.
For sure. The way we talked about it, and I used the Mike Tomlin phrase that he always says whenever there's trade rumors about someone on the team is, we don't want hostages. If you don't want to be here, that's fine. Yeah. But we need everybody pulling in the same direction, because it's not about right now. This is the environment that these young guys, whether it's Chillington, Pospisil, I'm drawing a terrible. Yeah, Pelletier was who I was trying to think of. My brain wasn't working there for a second. Pelletier, Coronado, etc. Those young guys, it is about putting those young guys in a position where they know what it means to be pros. They understand what it takes to be successful, because eventually those are going to be the established guys on the team. You need to have that institutional knowledge that you pass on from older teammates to younger teammates, and you keep that cycle going. The very simple things, like the older guys on the team chipping in to pay for a young guy's suit, or chipping in to make sure that when the rookie dinner comes around and they have that look of fear on their face as the check for 12 grand comes over, and you're one of the veteran guys, you put your card down and you take care of that guy. Those little types of things, they don't have a huge impact as far as wins and losses, but it does matter as far as the health of your organization. That when people come here, even if they're passing through, that, well, the Flames took care of me, the guys on the team, it didn't work out for me, but they looked out for me. That's the type of stuff that's invaluable when you're trying to establish a culture. And that's the entire point of having a new GM and a new coach at the same time. You want to have symmetry between those two parties with a unified vision looking ahead. And it starts with these little details. It's let's all be here 5 minutes early for practice. When we do team events, we make sure everybody comes that is available to come. Those types of little things where you don't foster those fissures and those fractions, where it doesn't even start off as like a naturally antagonistic thing that just kind of happens over time. That's why it's so important that you lay these good foundational steps now.
And I think a lot about like how Nick Foligno has just welcomed Connor Bedard into his home. And I think that, I mean, I'm sure situations like that happen in Calgary or have happened in the past and will happen in the future. But like, that's a great example of quite literally the veteran taking a child under his wing and just making sure that he's taken care of. And like, yeah, he's 18 and can take care of himself, but like he's on his own in a new city, in a whole new world. And I think about Matt Coronado coming up last season and how he didn't even have a shirt that fit. No one went to the mall and got him a nice button down.
It's very straightforward. Those little details matter in the long run, because if you want to build something sustainable, you want to have the same people in the same roles for an extended period of time. And you start that at the ground floor with those young guys who are going to have to be the faces of the team down the road, who are going to be the impactful players. And that starts now. These games matter, not in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of opportunities to learn, opportunities to grow, and just to get more seasoning. Like we talked about last week, when the time comes, I want Coronado up here, and I just want him to play. Same thing with Peltier. There is nothing to lose by letting those guys come up, make mistakes, figure it out, and get better as professionals, not even as hockey players, just learning what it means to be a professional. And for those guys in particular, and we talked about it in regards to Coronado last week, just physically maturing, getting on a NHL strength and conditioning program, getting a real dietitian as opposed to just eating Kraft mac and cheese. All of those things matter. You don't have great nutrition in the AHL because the team doesn't spend as much money. You don't have the same facilities as an NHL team in the AHL for opportunities to put on weight and to work out better. So when you get those guys up here, you got to do everything in your power to succeed. And we talked about this a lot last summer. There is no salary cap for your infrastructure as a team.
Yep.
You can spend as much money as you want on support staff and facilities to put your players in a position to succeed. There's no excuse to not be doing that.
No, and you're setting your organization up for great success when you do that. And I think about Charlie McAvoy and how he had no diet coming into the NHL, and then the team nutritionist was like, we're going to put you on a diet and you're going to bulk up. And he did. And I would say that's going pretty well for him. And I mean, obviously, I'm not saying these players are going to turn into Charlie McAvoy, but it's the sense of becoming and blossoming into a professional athlete.
It's a long, arduous process. And we'll wrap up this segment on this note. Those young guys are too stupid to realize they're supposed to lose. I say that affectionately, but they don't realize they're supposed to be taking the lumps over the next couple of weeks. They think, oh, we can be annoying. We can keep winning games. We can stay in the mix. And I hope they do. That's a good environment for these young guys to be in, where it doesn't matter if they win or lose, but if they keep winning and being spiteful, weird things happen, man. All it takes is one of the teams in front of them having a bad few weeks, and, you know, they're 3 points out of a playoff spot, and the stupid kids think, all right, we're going to ruin that team's season. Just like on Saturday. The Oilers are better than the Flames in every way other than goaltending, and it would be very easy for them to have just lost that game. But the Flames, they put on that devilish grin and said, we'll see, and they won the game.
Yeah, and we are going to wrap up the show with our potentially false hope for the rest of this season and the future of this organization. And we will be back right after this. We are well past the halfway point in the season, and we're kind of in the early phases of winding down. But regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Fans can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, and more on Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid, Ovechkin, or Crosby will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. I feel like we are very much back where we were a year ago in terms of wanting this team to do well and to taste a little bit of success.
The Flames are, and if you aren't familiar with the show Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I'll be very, very brief, but there's a character who explains that he's always playing both sides so that no matter what, he wins. That's where we're at with the Flames. Either they go on some Cinderella miracle run and they make the playoffs as the second wild card, and everybody's smiling and dumbfounded that they were able to do this after selling off at the deadline. Or we get good returns for the players they trade at the deadline. The young guys get valuable experience, and we get a good running start into next year. No matter what, we win. No matter what, as a Flames fan, the rest of the way, you win this season. All the wins and losses for the actual team don't matter because we all know it's not about this season. Or we start winning a bunch of games and something weird happens. No matter what, we win.
Yeah, and I think it's important to appreciate both sides, because I definitely get why team, I don't want to call it tank because it's not tanking, but the rebuilding fans want all the losses. But I also understand why people are like, oh, go for it. What could stop us? And it's like, well, there's a lot of things. But at the end of the day, we're just here for entertainment. None of this truly impacts our lives. And it's sports. Just have fun with it.
Exactly. And there are going to be people who will never be happy no matter what. So taking them out of the equation, for the rational minded, the team will continue to be annoying. They will continue to give other teams difficult times. They will probably not win a lot of games the rest of the way because I imagine they are going to trade Markstrom, and Markstrom has been driving a lot of their success. Mm-hmm. But no matter what, you are making progress. As a hockey team, your general manager acknowledged, hey, this isn't working. We need to change what we're doing because this inconsistency, will they or won't they thing, isn't working for us. So we need to rethink how we're approaching our hockey operations. And the Flames have that first step, like we talked about. First step of a problem is acknowledging it exists. The Flames did that. Now it's about moving along that ladder, climbing up that ladder from, okay, we have a problem. Well, how do we address that problem? We need to get younger. We need to get cheaper. Okay, they've started that process. Now it's a matter of getting those young guys in here and giving them as much rope as they can possibly tug on, and we go from there. And then in a year or two, we can reassess the situation. But right now, on a game-to-game basis, have fun. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I think there's plenty of reasons to just watch the games, have fun, and like we just talked about, you win regardless of what the score is. Like, this team is finally accepting that there is a problem, and I do wonder if this would have happened had Brad Treliving stayed. But I'm glad that they have a fresh general manager and a fresh coach behind the bench to just kind of get this ball rolling and bring this team to where it should and could be.
That's the thing. There are no easy ways to do this. There is no straightforward path. There is no obvious, all you have to do is this, this, and this. The Flames are going to have to take their lumps. That doesn't mean we can't have fun in the process. The next couple weeks into the end of the season, that's about guys like Zary, Pospisil, Chillington, Coronado, Peltier, any Dustin Wolf, Vladar even. It's about those guys playing and figuring it out. As a Flames fan, you have tangible things to root for, and that's your young players getting opportunities, improving, growing confidence, so that, by next year, those guys are ready to be impactful players or more impactful players, and we get a better idea of what the Flames still need going forward to improve.
Yeah, and that's really, like you said, at the end of the day, it isn't just about these next 15, 20 games or however many it is. It's about the next 82 starting in October, or not even at the end of April. How are you going to assess and build this team to, fill out that roster that you have to have? And so it's helpful and it's not detrimental to this first step in your long road ahead of you.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I'd argue it's not even about next year's 82. Realistically, it is probably about the 2025-2026 82 games. That is, if you are a Flames fan right now, that is by this point, if we're not starting to be competitive again, that's when the alarm should start going off. We've got a long road to get there. It will not be pretty, but getting there and climbing out of this abyss is a very satisfying feeling. And you gotta stick to it. You can't do what the Flames always do, which is 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We're committed to this now. We traded Lindholm. We're probably going to trade Hannafin. We're probably going to trade Markstrom. All right, let's dig as deep as we can go into this hole. And then once we're ready to start adding back to it, then we can start climbing out.
Yeah. And how rewarding did it feel after those few years as a struggling Rangers fan?
Oh, it was great. They weren't, and we can tie it to the idea of the Flames. Rangers had no business going to the conference final 2 years ago. They just got stupidly lucky. They played an AHL goalie in the first round. Carolina didn't really do anything in the second round. And if Tampa Bay didn't wake up, they could have beaten Tampa Bay too. The stupid, irrational confidence young team has that air of magic to them at times. Carolina did that themselves a couple years prior when they went to the conference final the first year Brind'Amour was the coach when they made the playoffs. Mm-hmm. The young team that doesn't know any better is a dangerous recipe. It's just a matter of the Flames getting to that point.
Yeah, so you're going to want to stick around for that, and we will be here to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly here at Locked On Flames, so make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. Feel free to leave a 5-star rating and a nice little review on iTunes. That would be super helpful and great and kind of you. You can follow us on Twitter at Just Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. And Nick, do you have any parting words for us today?
Everybody have a good night. We'll see you guys tomorrow.